And in terms of closer to Brisbane, but on the north side and either side, is it mostly apartments or houses we're talking about?
Houses is my main, core area of business. But of course, we have agents in both of our offices that sell a ton of apartments as well.
So what's doing best now, though? Is it? I mean,
apartments have just gone boom in Brisbane.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why is that? In Brisbane, you mean within the close part of the river?
Yeah, in Clayfield, Hamilton, Ascot.
Right.
We consider the one and the same where our office is based.
What's causing that? What's driving that?
A younger demographic of buyer just looking to get into the market is what I'm seeing. I can't comment on the whole of the market.
Affordability or
affordability, I think.
Or is it younger demographic prefer the lock-up and, the view or whatever it is that they get?
Look, I think it's affordability. Apartments are not my key market, but from what I'm seeing, it's affordability.
Right. So is there much of a difference though between the price of a, say, 2-bedroom house in a good building in Hamilton, maybe with a bit of view, relative to, say, a 3-bedroom house in the same area? Is there much of a price difference?
Yeah, there is. The median house price across these suburbs really sits around that 2.5-3 million.
Right.
Wow. And sometimes that's not getting. I feel horrible saying it, but it's not getting you anything.
Flash.
It's nothing flash.
Yep.
So you're certainly not getting a view in most instances for that price. Whereas an apartment, you'll certainly get a view, especially if you're willing to make compromises in an older building. You'll get all the bells and whistles for something in that price range or much lower.
And that house that you're talking about for that average price at 2.5 mil.
Yep.
Is that a so-called renovator's dream? Is it like it's got a crappy
kitchen? It could be if it was on an A-grade street. It absolutely. I mean, you could. I sold a property at the end of start of this year for 8.3 million. That house is being knocked down.
Wow.
So that was purely for the land value, 8.3 million.
Big block of land though.
Big block of dirt. Circa 1,000 square meters.
So it's a 1/4 acre block. An old school 1/4 acre block.
Yeah.
But it also has to be in a good street.
Has to be in a good street. I mean, 2.5 million might get you a fancy new build home in Wavell Heights, but you're going out another 8 kilometres to get there.
Right.
Whereas in Ascot, 2.5 million, you're making some pretty severe compromises in most instances.
So you're looking at is the compromise, generally speaking, the size of the land?
Could be the size of the land, could be the condition of the house. A lot of these homes you can't knock down if they're pre-war. So.
Oh, really?
Correct.
So they've got some sort of
character
conservation
overlay. Or it may even be heritage. So those homes, you have to work within what you're given.
Oh, wow. So you got constraints as to how you can fix it up.
There are definite constraints. And because Ascot's, one of the older suburbs in Brisbane, there's not a lot of space to come across a home that can be knocked down or a vacant piece of land. So this drives the values up as well.
So if I said to you, look, here's a spare 10 large. I don't want you to borrow any money, but I want you to go and buy.
What interest rate are you giving me, Mark?
No, free. I'm not going to charge you any rate. I'm just going to say, mate, just spend the money well because I want to put my super into Brisbane. Mm-hmm. Where and what would you buy?
Personally, I'd buy high end in Ascot or Hamilton, only because we're seeing such a huge increase in demand for that top end of town.
And that's the $8 million deal?
8 million. There was a 9.7 million I did at the end of last year, which was an Ascot home. There is 7.8 for another tennis court home. We're having multiple offers on these homes. Wind back the clock 5 years, you were struggling to find that buyer.
So where are these buyers coming from with all this cash?
Like I said, last time I was here, we were hypothesising, what was it driving the migration to Brisbane, from Melbourne and Sydney? Was it lifestyle, health, affordability? And I think it was all three of those for the interstate buyers. But what it's really done is spur those local buyers into action.
But where are they getting the dough from? I mean, if that's the top of the market, like it probably is, they're not. It's not like they're selling something for 30 million and downsizing to 8 or 9 million.
Correct.
They're upgrading to 8 or 9 million. It's not like that's not an amount of money you can borrow. You're not going to go to your Westpac bank and say, look, can you lend me 8 million? Yep. You're not going to get 90% LVR or even 70% LVR or something like that. Where are these people getting their money from?
I think with the boom in property that's come in Brisbane, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a big, increase in the entrepreneurial scene in Brisbane altogether. And that's been there for quite a while. We all know that. But it's been on the increase for, especially since we last spoke 2 years. So there's a lot of young business owners, a lot of businesses that have done really well post-COVID. And of course, the interstate buyers that moved up pre-COVID as well.
Yeah. So in migration terms, Queensland is still doing very well relative to the rest of Australia in terms of growth. And I'm not talking about from overseas. I'm talking about most of the overseas people come to Sydney and Melbourne. they get established, then they think about migrating or leaving, going to somewhere like Queensland because they want to get away from traffic, get better weather, etc. But generally speaking, the migration of people who have already been established in Australia is generally speaking going north. It's going to Queensland. So it's going particularly out of Melbourne, but to some extent out of Sydney. And I guess what's happening is they're selling their expensive places here in Sydney, Melbourne. They're selling for 12, 15 million. And then they're going up there and they say, well, I'll bank 2, but I'll buy with 8, and I want that property, and I'll pay whatever I have to pay for it because there's only one of them. There's only one Ascot.
It's only one Ascot,
and no one's going to recreate another one somewhere else because Ascot's not only about the size of the land, the size of the properties, but Ascot's where it's located, what it's close to. So it's what the infrastructure that's close to that's really valuable to people. It's about lifestyle at the end of the day.
It is.
And people pay for it because I often wonder, like someone said to me the other day that houses in Mossman, just a plain Federation home on maybe 1,000 square meters, nice inside, clean, but nothing fancy. It sells for $6 million, and like I was like, well, who are these buyers? Because they're not going to borrow 3; they're going to borrow maybe 1 or 2. Where are they getting the 4 from? And it turns out that they're people who had a bigger house somewhere else in Sydney or Melbourne, or wealthy migrants coming here. So a lot of wealthy migrants coming into Sydney buying these properties. In a couple of years, they're going to say, oh, well, it's a bit crowded here. The kids are growing up. They're going to school. Why don't we move to Queensland where the weather's better, generally speaking? And Brisbane's got a lot of good stuff to offer now, lifestyle-wise. And we don't really care about the beach so much. A lot of these people don't get to the beach. They're the sort of people who are going to end up in Brisbane. And I still, my thesis still is Queensland's going to still keep kicking on hard by virtue of wealthy migration into Queensland, established migration into Queensland, for all the reasons everyone keeps talking about. It's not just weather, it's everything else is going on up there, access, lifestyle. You don't have 5.5 million people living in one city like we do here in Sydney. I don't even, there's probably a couple of million living in Brisbane, but still, it's not like hectic in terms of traffic and stuff like that.
It's easy living.
Easy living. What would you say to someone then who's maybe here in Sydney and they're thinking about building a bit of a portfolio for their future for 20 years from now? What would you say to them? They've got a small amount of money to invest and they can borrow some. They can probably spend up to 1.5. Where would you suggest, given your franchises, where would you suggest that they buy?
That's a conversation I have nearly daily.
Right.
So I'm well versed in what I would recommend, and that would be your typical 600 block with a post-war home that in future you can knock down in those inner suburbs that are out a little bit further. Nunda, Wavell Heights, Kedron, if you go west into your Ashgroves and places like that.
Kedron, is that near, correct me, I'm thinking of a Kenmore. It's not out.
No, Kenmore's out west.
Yeah.
Little. Yeah.
Kedron's much closer in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Much closer in. So these homes will get you a return as they stand. The rental market's very tight in Brisbane.
Is it?
Right? Very tight.
So you get a reasonable rent for it?
You'll get a reasonable rent. Some of the rents there's upward pressure on rents in a big way.